Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in once again. Welcome to kind of the first rendition of like a JWalk tech tips. It's gonna be a new series that I'm gonna be doing where I kind of try and go more in depth on, you know, some parts that I've been able to test during my career or things that I've been able to test and tune on the motorcycle or even with your body or cameras or whatever it might be. Over the last 22 years of racing motocross, I've definitely learned a lot, and I feel like I can be able to use that to help you guys as well. So to kick things off today, I figured we would talk about one of the parts that I feel is like the least understood and most underrated part on a motorcycle, and that is the triple clamp. I feel like a lot of people, especially with hard parts, things such as triple clamps, engine mounts, things like that, it can sometimes be hard to understand what exactly they do, especially with all of the jargon and lingo that goes around, such as flex characteristic, front end feel, improved suppleness, all that sort of thing. And it can be kind of hard to understand exactly what that means. So I'm hoping that by the end of this video, you guys will have a better understanding of what exactly a triple clamp does, why it's important, and maybe whether you guys should be considering upgrading from your stock clamps. So as you guys can see on the table in front of me, I'm gonna be using the Luxon Gen 2 Austrian bike triple clamps as sort of my example piece in this video. These are some of the best clamps that you can get on the market right now. I ran them the entire 2022 season on both my race and my practice bike. They helped me achieve my best results as a professional, scoring points at multiple rounds, which is something I've never done before. The set on my left came off of my practice bike. I have about 55 hours on these ones, and then the set on my right came off of my race bike. Those have about 35 hours on them. So in total, almost 100 hours that I have on these things. I feel like I've done enough testing and riding on them at this point to give you guys some good input and just talk about triple clamps in general. Whenever I show off items from my sponsors, I always like to put a disclaimer in there that I am sponsored by Luxon in my racing endeavors. But what I always like to say is that any company that I work with, whether it's plastic, a helmet, boots, gear, triple clamps, exhaust systems, whatever, I have previous experience with these parts. You know, I was a customer first, and then because I love the parts and believe them to be of the highest caliber, I then reach out to the company and initiate the partnership. And if I'm lucky enough, as in with the case with Luxon, they agree to partner with me. So any sponsor that I run, it's because I love their part and I seeked out the sponsorship, not the other way around. There will never ever be a point on this channel where a company approaches me and says, hey, we want to pay you to say this and this about a part. I will just never do that, and I obviously will not run a part on my motorcycle at a pro national that I don't believe is actually a performance enhancer. So just like to get that out of the way right off the rip. Luxon does support me, but I'm not being paid to say good things about them, and I chose to work with them because I believe in their product. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the meat of this video and start talking about triple clamps. There's a handful of reasons why you might want to upgrade from your stock triple clamps. Although it's one of the least understood parts on a motorcycle, ironically, it is the part that can change the most. It can completely change how your bike handles, and I think it's important for you guys to understand because you may be suffering with an issue on your bike that you've been chasing through suspension or anything else, when it could just be a simple triple clamp change that will help you. So I'll go ahead and start with the absolute most basic reason someone might switch and work my way up to the most complex. So number one on the list, it is undeniable how much cooler and how factory these things look compared to, especially if you have a Japanese bike with a cast aluminum style triple clamp. At least on the Austrian bikes, it does come with billet CNC machine clamps, so they look pretty cool, but just color matching the orange to your KTM or red to a Honda or anything like that looks super factory. So I feel like that's a big reason why a lot of people choose to upgrade their triple clamps. And you know what? It's perfectly okay if you don't care about any of the technical data and you just decide that you want to get triple clamps because they look cooler. That is absolutely okay. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You spend $100 on a plastic kit, $250 on graphics, which have absolutely no performance benefits at all. So if you want to drop a couple $100 on a really cool looking set of triple clamps that also offer other performance benefits, totally cool in my book. Don't ever be ashamed about that. Because let me tell you, my race bikes looked sick this year, and it was a big part because of the Luxon triple clamps. Second reason you might upgrade your triple clamps is that you want to shed some weight off of your motorcycle. This obviously isn't a huge part, so you're not going to be able to shave a ton of weight off this thing, like multiple pounds. But what's nice about removing weight from your triple clamp is that they're located very high up on your motorcycle. Shedding weight off your dirt bike is always important, but the higher up the part is on your motorcycle, the more it's going to lower the center of mass and the center of gravity. So let's say you remove half a pound off of these, that's going to help more than removing half a pound off of just for example, like your foot pegs or something that's located lower on your motorcycle. Lowering your center of gravity will absolutely help performance and just staying planted in corners, so that's always a good thing. You may think to yourself though, well, isn't it a little bit sketchy to reduce the weight of a triple clamp, such a viable part that connects the front end to the rear end of your motorcycle? Normally I'd agree with you, but honestly some stock parts are just made a little bit inefficiently, and the guys over at Luxon were able to engineer these clamps not only lighter but also significantly stronger than the stock clamps. So lighter weight and less likely to break. That's a win-win in my book. So those are kind of more surface level reasons why someone might change, and they definitely don't matter as much as the points that are upcoming, which is you can completely change the flex characteristic of a motorcycle by changing how rigid your triple clamps are. And that's one of those buzzwords that companies or test riders like to associate with triple clamps. They just say, oh, they improve flex characteristic. And you're just kind of supposed to believe that without really having any more information about it, but it can be tough to understand what they actually mean by just saying they improve flex characteristic. And that's one of the main reasons that I went with Luxon to begin with, is that you can hop right on their website, and depending on what bike you're buying them for, they tell you exactly what they did to the clamp to change it from stock, so that you're not just putting this part on your bike and just wondering what exactly it's changing from stock. You know exactly what you're getting, and then you can actually go out there and directly feel it when you're on the track. So if we go ahead and hop on the Luxon website right here and look at these exact clamps that I have, you can read straight from it. The stock KTM triple clamps are rather lightweight as is, but they lack strength and torsional stiffness. Our design goals for these clamps were to increase torsional stiffness for more steering precision, increase longitudinal flex for comfort, and increase strength without adding weight. Stiffer in torsion for precise steering, stiffer vertically to maintain fork alignment, yet balanced stiffness with enough flex in lateral and longitudinal direction for comfort and rideability. And it's different for every motorcycle depending on how stiff the frame is. So a Suzuki, for example, has a very stiff frame. So the goal is to provide a little bit more flex with the triple clamp so that less of that jarring feeling is making its way up to your handlebars and you get a little bit more comfort out of the frame. Swap over to a bike like a Kawasaki, which has a little bit of a softer feel. Maybe you want to stiffen the triple clamp up to improve the precision and just help you give a little bit more precise handling and a little bit more feedback into the handlebars so that you can accurately make suspension changes based on what you're feeling in your hands. One of the many reasons why I love Luxon, you guys can get on and look up exactly what your clamps will do for the motorcycle that you are purchasing them for. Beyond that, if you guys follow Luxon on Instagram, they're always posting all of the engineering. They'll actually post like the simulations from some of their clamps and show you the percentage of where the flex is happening and where they've added material due to a simulation where they felt like material needed to be added. So it's really cool and fascinating to look at. I really like how engineering oriented these guys are. They're not just kind of copying the stock clamp and putting it out there on the market. They're really innovating and trying to make these things as good for the rider as possible. And they do a lot of testing on their own. They're always out testing triple clamps on their bike to make sure that what they're seeing in the lab also translates to rider feel. They're constantly working with privateers, and even the Club MX Yamaha team runs their clamps. So they're getting all that good feedback from some of the top racers in the world, which is really nice. And all of that data is available for just the average consumer to look at, which I think is really cool and kind of uncommon. Not a lot of companies do that. So big tips to Luxon, one of the many reasons why I enjoy working with them. Another big reason you might want to change, and something that the Luxon website kind of touched on, was maintaining fork alignment and just making sure that your forks can operate properly. Your forks are basically two tubes sliding inside of each other, so it is absolutely crucial that they are perfectly straight and they're not being crushed around. If you take a look at the stock clamps on a KTM, the upper clamps and the bottom clamps, the bolts are on the same side. So I've heard it explained this way one time. Imagine trying to squeeze a paper towel roll with your hands on the same side of it and trying to maintain that roundness. Well, it's much harder to do that when your hands are on the same side, whereas if you switch your other hand to the other way, it's much easier to maintain the roundness of the paper towel roll. And that's exactly the idea with some aftermarket clamps such as the Luxon ones, with the upper mounts having the bolts on the opposite side as the lower mounts. That allows your forks to not be crushed at all when you're tightening them down, which can make them operate a lot more smoothly, which is obviously good. You spend a lot of money on your suspension, and it would be a shame to be crushing them down and making them not operate as optimally efficiently as they could be. The Luxon clamps were also designed to utilize a lower torque spec than the stock clamps due to the titanium bolts and just the design of the clamps. The more you clamp down on it, the more you crush it, and the more binding can happen. With these clamps, the torque spec is lower, so it doesn't crush the forks quite as much, allowing your forks to work better. A lot of people undervalue torque specking all the bolts on their bike, and let me tell you right now, I can tell a significant difference when I completely loosen my front end, torque everything to spec, rather than if I just put it together with a T-handle and try to guess how tight to make everything. It's really nice that the torques are just stamped right on there so that you get it right every time, and it just makes sure your whole front end works perfectly. Speaking of making your front end work better, adding a steering stabilizer to your bike can greatly increase the comfort and stability that you have over your front end, and most stock clamps don't have a mounting point for a steering stabilizer to be utilized. But you can see on the Luxon clamps right here in the front, they've actually added a little mounting spot for a steering stabilizer so that you don't have to get a weird bracket to put around your frame or on your front number plate or your handlebars or whatever. It's right on the clamp here, which is super nice. And that will allow you to put the steering stabilizer on there to make your front end handle even better. So we've covered some good things already, but by far the biggest reason that you should consider upgrading to a new triple clamp is that you can actually change the geometry of your entire motorcycle by changing your fork offset and your handlebar mounting position on the triple clamps. If you're looking at a bird's eye view of your triple clamps, your fork offset is how far forward the center of your fork tubes are from the center of your steering tube. So on most bikes, they come stock with 22 millimeters between the two. Typically, you can either go longer or shorter by 2 millimeters. So for instance, Luxon offers a 20 millimeter and a 24 millimeter for most of their motorcycles. Basically what this does is just moves your forks 2 millimeters forward or 2 millimeters backward, and that's a very surface level understanding of it. This also does affect the trail of your motorcycle, which is how far the center of your front wheel is behind an imaginary line that goes from your head tube all the way to the ground. There are plenty of videos out there that explain that better than I ever could, so I'll link those down below. But basically, what you want to understand is that increasing the fork offset will improve stability, where decreasing the offset will improve cornering. So for Supercross, some guys like to go with a shorter offset. For most of you, myself included, riding outdoors, you might want to consider going with a longer offset. The KTM is a very stable bike, especially up front, so most people just stick with the standard 22 millimeters, but for example, a Honda, which experiences quite a bit of front end twitch at high speed and under braking coming into a corner, a lot of the top Honda outdoor riders will go to a 23.5 or a 24 millimeter offset front fork, just to provide a little bit more stability, and it is huge, the difference that that will make. I had a chat with a couple of my buddies who race Hondas, and they told me that after testing a 22 millimeter versus a 24 millimeter triple clamp, the difference was like 3 to 4 seconds a lap time, just because they were able to push so much harder coming into corners. So by far, that's the biggest reason that you would want to consider changing your triple clamps. If you're just not experiencing comfort with your front end, especially at high speed, going with a bigger offset will drastically help that and just improve your comfort immensely. Or maybe if you live in an area where it's hard packed dirt and you need a little bit tighter steering, maybe you want to look into going with a 21 or 20 millimeter offset just to give you a little bit of a quicker turn in. But for the vast majority of people, you want to be looking at a bigger offset. Luxon is currently in the process of making a Gen 3 triple clamp, which will actually allow you to customize the offset from 20 millimeters all the way up to 24 millimeters, which will be really, really cool. That essentially will let you have 4 different triple clamps in one and eliminate the need to buy multiples to test out different offsets. Cannot wait for those to come out. But it doesn't stop there. Aftermarket triple clamps can also allow you to customize the mounting position of your handlebars on the upper clamp. The Generation 2 clamps from Luxon utilize the same position as stock, and then they have the handlebar mounts, which you can flip forwards or backwards for 7 millimeters of adjustability there. However, the Gen 3 clamps that are coming out will have 3 different mounting holes, and then also have the forward and backward position of the handlebar mounts, which will allow you up to 6 different mounting positions for your handlebars. So if you're a shorter rider, you might run them in the back holes. If you're a taller rider, you might run them in the forward holes. Obviously, test that out. the further forward you have your bars, the more weight you'll be putting on the front end when you're coming into corners, and that can decrease stability. Vice versa, if you have them too far back, maybe you can't weight the front end quite as much as you want to. But that's the beauty of providing all of that adjustability, is so that you guys can do that testing on your own and decide exactly what you like without having to buy 6 different upper triple clamps. Speaking of handlebar mounts, Luxon has their anti-twist mount system, which is really cool. The lower mounts are one piece so that you literally cannot twist them unless you bend the bolts that go through the upper triple clamp, and I've taken some hard spills this year and have yet to do that. So that could be the difference between finishing a race and not finishing the race, or having to pull into the pits to straighten your bars out. You can also just get the bar mounts and put them on your stock triple clamps if that's something you're interested in doing. So there you have it, guys, a whole ton of reasons why you might want to upgrade your triple clamps, and in my opinion, totally worth the price, especially if you're struggling with something on your motorcycle that you're looking to fix. The triple clamp is a great way to resolve some serious issues. If you have a geometry issue with a motorcycle, it can be very hard to chase that issue and resolve it with just suspension settings alone. So having the ability to completely change the geometry of a motorcycle is absolutely enormous. And I seriously encourage you guys, if you are looking for some aftermarket triple clamps, seriously take a look at Luxon. They support privateers like me, which is epic. They're just really good people over there, and no doubt they will be continuing to innovate. Plus, they just make a product that in my mind is the absolute best on the market. So there you go, episode 1 of the Tech Talk. Tech Talk with JWalk. That kind of rolls off the tongue pretty nice. Anyways, first episode of Tech Talk with JWalk. You guys, please let me know if you enjoyed this sort of thing. There are so many parts on a motorcycle, and obviously dirt bike parts are not cheap, but I'm lucky that I'm in a position where I can work with companies and I get to do a lot of testing with parts that, you know, the average consumer might not be able to do, whether it's because of financial reasons or you just don't have the time to get out there and do all that testing. I do. So I like to help you guys, and I like to report to you on things that I find so that I can kind of eliminate some of the guesswork for you guys, just help you understand your motorcycle better and get it performing as good as possible without completely breaking the bank. So if you enjoyed this video, please let me know if there's something that you're really interested in seeing next, whether it's handlebars, suspension, rims, pistons, whatever it is, let me know, and I'll do my best to make another one of these videos really soon and just teach you guys the stuff that you want to know. But I think that about does it. Huge thank you to Luxon for just being awesome and supporting privateers. It's something that we really need. And even if you guys aren't in the market for triple clamps, and go shoot them a follow on Instagram or whatever. They post some really cool stuff, especially if you're into engineering and numbers and all that. Definitely encourage you to go show them some love and tell them I sent you and thank them for supporting me. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for tuning into this Tech Talk. Let me know what you want to see next. I'll catch you in the next one. Later, guys.